we're forced to drink out of, paper straws while Taylor Swift is taking a private jet to get a cheeseburger or something.
A complete unambiguous win to the far right.
Anybody want to disagree with me? Fight.
Welcome to Progressive Victory's Spectrum, where we'll finally find out, do all progressives think the same? I will be reading a series of controversial statements designed to divide the left and cause it to eat itself. And the contestants here will move to the left if they agree and to the right if they disagree. Are we ready to play?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's do it. Number 1. Police are working class.
I mean, this is a technicality thing. This is an asterisk thing, right? Obviously, police work for their paychecks, and that is definitionally working class. It's more a matter of, to an extent, I think that what class you're in is kind of defined by your interests. You look the world around, police are almost always on the other side of any working class movement because they have a different set of class interests. They're kind of a subcategory, really. So they work for their paycheck, sure, but historically, they tend to be motivated by a very different set of interests than, the union workers that they're sent to harass. So, not always the case, just it's a pattern.
Yeah, I think it's possible to be working class and also to perpetuate these oppressive systems. Like, that's one of the way that the capitalist class keeps itself going is by using, workers to perpetuate their systems of power, their systems of control. And police are like the prime example of that. So, yeah, I think you can be both.
So I do agree with some of your sentiments. The reason why I land on disagree is because, for example, I'm from the Bay Area, and the Bay Area cops on overtime make hundreds and thousands of dollars. Like, I'm talking 600, 700, $800,000 just on working overtime. And for me, it's like, yeah, working class does include clocking into your job, doing a trade specialty, but at the same time, if you're getting paid $600, $700,000, in my opinion, you still land on a much higher class of income as opposed to someone who's working in a grocery store, for example. So that's why I kind of disagree, because although I do agree to some extent that their jobs are working class, their income, especially in very metropolitan areas, when you include overtime, is much higher than the average working class person.
Number 2. Competition breeds innovation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start. Like, I think that it's precisely the problem that anti-competition is what breeds a lack of innovation. Like, when we see these monopolies, these oligopolies that completely control markets, there's no desire to innovate. And I mean, we can even think about this question on kind of like the abstract. Like, when something gets competitive, like, there's a lot more people that are trying to, like, play around with it, try new things. I mean, you can think about, like, competitive games as an example. Like, people are going to try a lot of new strategies in those. Like, competition itself is not the problem. What's the real problem going on is that there's anti-competition. There's no kind of like support mechanisms for people that are living under these kind of monopolies and oligopolies.
When you're talking about like fiscal competition, just in terms of money, really competition breeds copycats. You see that all the time in all kinds of markets, like the drug market. You got all these copycat drugs for no reason. You have like 50 different brands of Oreos that all taste exactly the same. And I just think that that's not innovation, that's copycat. And so that's kind of how I view it. Now, if you're talking about competition in terms of who can make the best Oreo, who can make the best game, I guess I can see it that way. But I just think in general, like when we say competition breeds innovation, we're talking more about the financial element of it, at least when we usually talk about it.
I mean, I think there's a reason why antitrust laws are good and monopolies are bad. It clearly helps companies and individuals create things that otherwise might not have been possible. Even when the situation is quote unquote copycats, that's how you get like affordable generic drugs though. Companies are able to innovate price-wise by being able to create a drug that had been come up by someone else and create a cheaper version that more people could access. I mean, that's innovation, if you ask me, because they're creating a cheaper product. And I don't know if any of you are pro wrestling fans, but everybody knows the wrestling industry has not been the same since the WWE purchased their competition, WCW and ECW, in the early 2000s. That should tell you all you need to know.
Like, I like competition. I think competition is good. I just don't think that the profit motive is always the best way of working out how that should, how those chips should fall. Sometimes you get a better product that's not as like economically viable. Sometimes you have a product that could be better if it had like peripheral support, like electric vehicle chargers, for example, is something that's incited a lot of hot debate for fans of that sort of thing, where you have like proprietary technology that kind of locks out a portion of the market, and that is competitive in a sense, in that it's good for the finances, but it doesn't allow for like innovation on a technological level. I mean, we owe a lot to, I guess, humans' desire to one up one another, and I think that desire existed prior to the kind of like formalized market systems that we enjoy today. Like the people have always been trying to do that. Grug was carving better rocks. Uh, Long before we had paper currency. So it's just the incentive structure underneath it and how we best channel it. Um, I agree we probably don't need like 50 kinds of similar Oreos. Like maybe the effort put into producing those could go towards like building a hospital somewhere. I don't know, somehow reallocating that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, with antitrust laws being like one staple of that, I guess it's just kind of building a framework where competition can thrive in a way that doesn't waste our time, ideally.
Number three, I am hopeful for America's future.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for America's future. It's good to be hopeful, right? I also think that Democrats have moved more progressive than they ever have, and I think that Republicans are going to lose for the foreseeable future. And the reason I'm not more over there is because there's a chance I'm wrong.
Yeah, I try to maintain as much hope as possible. It can be hard to be hopeful sometimes, and you don't always expect the best outcomes. But I think just hoping for them, and to whatever extent you're religious, I guess praying for it. um, it's important, and I think that a lot of the younger generation is growing up to be a lot more progressive. Especially with the rise of internet culture, with all of its downfalls, I think that it's really brought people together. And yeah, like I said, I just try to keep my hopes as high as possible.
Yeah, don't want to hedge my bets too much because things have gone wrong before, but I think that in like a broad material sense, there are strong undercurrents to the way society is changing that are nearly irreversible and generally positive. Mostly with the young folks and the increasing visibility of the gay, queer people or whatever. It's just hard to hate people when you know them. It's why, for all of its faults, like major American cities are basically global hubs of progressivism. They're incredibly diverse. They have access to a wide range of cultural influences. You get to meet all sorts of people. We're in New York right now. I mean, I grew up in LA. There are some crazy experiences that you can have there that would have been literally impossible anywhere in the world 50, 60 years ago, maybe. And, I think that like there are very few political happenstance, even stuff like climate change or like a massive political shift that can undo all the good that adjacency has done. It's not always going to be straight up. I think it's a bumpy road, but I don't really see how anything could undo that progress.
So, although I do agree that the sentiment of the people is changing and the younger generation is becoming more and more progressive by the day, I think politically we still have a lot of issues. A lot of our politicians are, quite frankly, bought out. Like, we're literally here because one of our favorite politicians is getting bought out by a lobbying group that has the interest of a foreign country. So I think we still have long ways to go to actually enact federal policy that is going to bring about real change. But I do think socially we are moving towards a path of progression, if that makes sense, which is why I'm on the disagree line. I think that socially we're moving towards the right direction. When it comes to politicians and actually being able to elect people who are for our best interests, I think we have long ways to go.
Number four, it is good that America is the lone global superpower right now.
I'm over here because I remember World War I and World War II, and Europe sucks, and I'm glad that they're not like in charge of the world anymore. So that's good. But I think that the best part of American history was whenever the USSR challenged the US in a lot of different ways. We went to the moon back then, and then the USSR fell apart, and now we don't want to do anything. So I don't think it's great that we're the only thing, but like, it's better back than the World War I days.
I want to bounce off that and just say that I think militarily, multipolarity is actually quite ruinous. I mean, basically every conflict over the past century has derived in some form from like two powers duking it out by proxy. Like, depending on how far back you stretch the definition of the word proxy, this is like the Middle East with Iran, right? Vietnam, Korea with us and China and the Soviet Union. Like, constantly, this is how it goes down. I think economically, multipolarity is amazing. Like, the more economic investment you have between two cultures, societies, countries, empires, the less likely they are to invade. The fact that we are so economically intertwined with China, for example, probably the reason why Taiwan hasn't gotten invaded yet, or why we haven't, been more openly aggressive. We're just too interconnected. So more of that. I want every part of the world to have such deep ties to each other that it would be ruinous for them to ever, get in a fight. Right? A lot of what Russia's doing right now is a product of the fact that their economy, right? Their like natural gas and oil heavy export like economy. It's resistant to that like interdependence. So yeah, I don't know. Trade, get along.
Okay, I think America's fucking the world up royally. I think when we look at, especially historically, like different continents like South America, um, Asia, the Middle East right now in particular, we are very selfish. We're basically the police. We bully anyone that doesn't listen to us. We sanction them. We kill them. We murder them. And no, I don't think us being a global superpower is responsible for the greater good of Earth in general. I mean, we're looking at what's happening in Palestine and Gaza right now. Like, what I would never in good faith be able to say that we are a good global superpower or that we are responsible with our power alone, not just domestically but globally. And domestically, I mean, we are sending billions of dollars to these countries. What are we doing for our own people? Our own veterans are in the street dying. So am I going to sit here and say we're really good at being the global superpower? Absolutely not. No, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, Ariana covered it. I mean, the U.S. has, as the superpower, has bullied its way to getting what it wants with practically, any country that has something that it wants. I'm not saying that the U.S. should fall, but it would be better if, like what Vosh said, there were more interconnectivity between all these countries to the point where they all viewed each other as, equal partners in their relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing with what everybody over here is saying. I think that the one thing for me why I'm on kind of like the slight angle is that I think that the whole world situation could be a lot worse if there were other countries in power, particularly like, these kind of like war-hungry dictatorships. Like, I mean, we've seen what Russia's been doing to Ukraine. It'd be a lot scarier if they had the power to invade a lot of other countries.
Number 5. Was BLM successful?
I mean, was Black Lives Matter successful in like everything they set out to do? No, but were they successful in one very important thing in sort of making normies, like everyday people who may not be in the political bubble that we're all in, realize that there is prejudice and things that Black people in this country go through that they might not be aware of or even ever go through. I think for sure that's the case, and I think maybe without taking that in mind, it could look like politically Black Lives Matter was, broadly not successful. But I think in terms of changing the ideas of the average American who was open to the idea but never might have considered it, I think absolutely, and I think that's pretty important.
I think a lot of it's a message discipline issue, to be honest. I like slogans. Defund the police, great slogan, punchy. Obviously, Biden couldn't just snap his fingers and get involved with police overnight. There had to be like a kind of incremental set of goals that can be met. You meet goals, you feel good about your movement. That's a win. The win, you get to communicate with the media. Unfortunately, the BLM movement, as large as it was, there wasn't that like well-structured attitude. There wasn't that clear goal, and I think the clear goal is important even as like an intermediary period, because it informs people that you're capable of achieving what you want. We kind of didn't get any of the policy goals we wanted, not substantively, and I don't know. I think it disillusioned a lot of people. I think it was just like a 2-year-long bout of adventurism for some progressive people that didn't translate into a long-term set of policy goals.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, but I do think when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement of like 2020, I think and maybe I have experience seeing this because I have 2 young kids. They are learning about things with when it comes to Black American history at an age I don't remember learning about in school. And I do think BLM, the movement, really made a lot of people, and maybe this is in liberal areas like New York City mostly, but even there, I don't remember learning about this stuff at the age they are. And I do think the BLM movement spoke to people who were open to it, but weren't actively getting involved or educating or even educated themselves on it. And I do think there was a distinct change post the BLM movement of 2020 when it comes to how normie people in liberal cities, I can only speak from my experience, see the Black American experience. And I think that changes for the good. Even if we don't see the results right away, I think we will see them down the line 5-10 years from now because of what our kids are learning today.
Number 6. Descendants of American slaves deserve reparations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious, like, given the history of slavery and how that continues to impact where people live, the kinds of resources and community opportunities that they have access to, it just seems like an obvious win to invest in those communities, to improve people's lives, and just get this country in a better state, especially as a way of paying back all of the massive damage we did and all of the massive work that these people have done.
I think we should give everybody money, but give them more money. As long as everyone's getting money, I'm happy.
Number 7. UBI is a good policy to pursue.
We had that earlier question about whether competition breeds innovation, and I think we were a little bit more divided on that one. But I think we all can strongly, for the most part, believe that having money breeds innovation because we have time, we have the resources to be creative and be, put our creativity out there in the world. And I know that when I am stressing about money, I am less creative and less productive. So yeah, give us all money and we will put out good things to the world.
I do agree that we all definitely need more money and we need a basic of it. I think that investing more, the reason I'm somewhat agree is because I think that it's a good policy to pursue, but it has to be in combination with other policies. Otherwise, what you end up getting is, just increased rent prices, increased, grocery prices and all that. And I think that if you're focusing heavily, like Andrew Yang did, on strictly a UBI policy, that you might let other things go by the wayside. So while I do agree that it's a good thing to pursue, I think that other things come first.
So both of my parents have stage 4 cancer, and like we had to literally fight like in court for my mom to get disability, and I had to financially support my dad for multiple months. And I just feel like if UBI actually existed, a lot of people wouldn't be scared, like, hey, if I get a terminal illness, am I going to die on the street? Because that's very, medical debt is the biggest debt that Americans have in general. And I think UBI could solve a part of that where people would feel more secure. But also, when I started being a content creator, I had no money. If I had money to actually like coming in, it would have, like Matt said, it would have helped me innovate a lot easier, and it wouldn't have put me in a limbo of like, okay, am I going to pay my bills or am I going to pursue my dream? So I think UBI in general, and also, like I said, America has so much money to spend, we could spend on our people.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest elements of UBI that we really haven't touched on is like the family angle, especially for working class families like my own. If you're struggling to put food on the table, like just building up this next generation better, helping out families, giving these families time to like actually go out and pursue their dreams and do the kind of things they want to do, in addition to that family time and that working time, like that would make a huge difference for so many working class families.
Number 8. It is too late to fix climate change.
I mean, I agree that kind of the outlook looks bleak, but I don't want to engage in this kind of doomerism saying that it's too late, there's nothing we can do, or that like we can never get back to a better place. Like, I mean, especially with investments into like long-term green infrastructure, even nuclear infrastructure in the very long term.
We're not getting the old world back, unfortunately. Things always change. That's how things are. I don't think that people in the future are going to be particularly happy about the world that they eventually settle on after things stabilize. And I do think they're going to stabilize. I think that the world at the end of all this is going to be fine. It's going to have issues, but it's not going to be the same.
And I think that it would probably be good to temper optimism we have about addressing climate change with the understanding that ultimately we are talking about like least worst outcomes. Uh, we're trying to build out a better version of the worst case scenario, and that's fine. I mean, that's kind of all of life sometimes. I just don't want folks to get really like depressive when they learn one day definitively that the world that they grew up in is literally no longer achievable. You know, we have to temper our expectations. Still possible for things to be good.
Number 9. The purpose of protest is to disrupt.
Yeah, disrupt's kind of a broad term here. Look, I think that protests should be agreeable. Protests that are attractive in the sense that people want to join them are the ones that usually tend to succeed. You know, you don't want the agency or the government or the organization that you're against to succeed in alienating you against the people you're trying to win over and support. All of that being said, on a fundamental level, especially with the really important stuff, I think it's grown increasingly clear that like there are limits to the effectiveness of the civil protest that we sometimes idealize, I guess, in concept, you know? You can get a lot of good work done within that purview, but I think you can like pretty clearly look, for example, at the weird disparity between people's support for green energy, the protests against people who are against green energy, and what actually gets done. It's kind of like a fuzzy line, but we're running up against the limits of what we can change just by I don't know, appealing towards people's better sensibilities. Past a point, like doing a bit of a ruckus is kind of necessary.
Yeah, I think that this might be a bit of a wording thing, but for me, it's like disruption is kind of the mechanism of protest. Meanwhile, the purpose should be something beyond that, trying to influence cultural change, trying to influence policy change. I know when we were talking about some of the failures of the BLM movement, a lot of that was we didn't have that policy change. We didn't have any kind of like active change happening within our political system. And so I think that moving the actual purpose of protest beyond just the mechanism of disruption and making sure that that message of enacting these policies, these are the changes we want, is a pretty important part.
Number 10. Privacy is more important than national security when it comes to data collection.
All right, so the right to privacy is super important. It is paramount that people retain this important civil right, because we've seen how it's been perverted before with those arguments about national security. We've had Muslim people spied on in mosques in the name of national security. We've had civil rights organizations spied on uh, throughout history in the name of national security. And a lot of times, these privacy rights are intruded on for ulterior motives. We've seen the possibilities that happen when LGBTQ plus people are outed when that is not of their choice to be out, and the danger that puts them in. We could see what will happen in the near future if women in states where abortion has been criminalized get outed due to the fact that they are seeking an abortion. People will face consequences if their right to privacy is trampled on. And I think that's incredibly dangerous. And you never need that right to be treaded on in order to be more secure as a country.
I'm pro treading. I think privacy is kind of like free speech in a way. No one, we're all okay with our own privacy, but we're happy when our political opponents, their privacy is used against them. So I think you just let's make the field even, and everyone gets oppressed. I watched Minority Report, and I was like, yeah.
I think that Dreg, right? Okay, I think that Dreg brought up an interesting point as far as like we're more than happy to exploit it whenever our political opponent's privacy gets exposed. I think that once something is out there in the public, we as progressives can sort of use that responsibly to help better the world, and I think that takes precedent. But I do still think that privacy is important. I wouldn't put privacy on the line for that. I think that once it's out there in the public, it's fair game, but that's kind of my stance on it.
I think we need to sort of understand that like the cases that both of you guys have discussed are like cases of like journalists or whistleblowers in a company or something coming out and unveiling something about a politician or an executive. I think that is fair game. We're specifically talking about the government intruding on its citizens' privacy. And that's, I'm sorry, just period no, don't care who it is, don't care whether it's someone I absolutely hate politically in terms of their beliefs. No, government should not be taking away people's right to privacy, period.
And number 11, we should sacrifice our economy to save the planet.
Well, I just don't think we have to. I think it's a false dichotomy. I'm not a degrowther, you know? I think fundamentally most of our economy is pretty salvageable. You know, there are changes that can be made that preserve the fundamental like necessities of output. I don't like framing it as a we need to make sacrifices to prevent climate change kind of deal, because I don't really think we do. It gets framed so often as a matter of like recycling and personal water use and so on. And I'm not saying those things aren't good. I'm only saying that, you know, there are some top level policy changes, like the way we use our land, the amount of meat that we consume, like or the subsidies that we offer to meat or corn farmers, you know, transportation, the chemicals that we use for our fuel. There are things that we could do to address these that would be expensive in investment for the top level, right? But for us individually, you know, I think we could, maybe a hamburger gets a little more expensive. I don't know. Getting rid of leaded gasoline probably cost a few bucks too. I just think we can preserve the good parts. We don't have to suffer.
All right, the funny thing is I'm on the opposite side here as Vosh, but I agree with what he's saying. But the reason I'm here is because I don't view climate change as saving the planet. The planet's going to be fine. Climate change is an issue for people living on the planet. So I think in terms of like people, we'll be just fine and we'll deal with it just like Vosh said. I view this question as literally saving the planet. Like the economy needs to go, otherwise the earth explodes and everything's gone. In that case, I think we should probably do whatever it takes to save the planet.
I do agree with Bosch's sentiments, but I also like it begs the question of like, okay, a lot of the changes that we have to make have to do with the multi-billionaires as well that fly around with their private jets like unopposed, and like we're forced to drink out of, you know, paper straws while Taylor Swift is taking a private jet to get a cheeseburger or something. You know, I feel like when we're talking about sacrificing the economy, from my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, we have to sacrifice the lifestyle of a lot of these billionaires in order to achieve a climate change that is fair for all people, regardless of your tax bracket.
So I think where Vosh was coming from is a rejection of the question, kind of like the Giga Chad clip of that one guy who was approached on the street by that street interviewer. Just rejects the question because ultimately we don't have to pick between. I agree completely that we don't have to pick between the economy and the environment. They're both salvageable.
Yeah, I just want to say, to take a concrete stance, I'm with the conservatives on the paper straw thing, you know? Like policy, we solve 1 bajillionth of a percent of climate change. Meanwhile, we burn the Amazon down for AI generated foot pics or whatever. I don't know. I feel like that was like an insultingly low blow, I feel, the straw thing in particular. Yeah, so on that respect, complete unambiguous win to the far right. For everything else, they need to shape up. And also, we should pollute a little less, I think.
I don't think we're gonna sacrifice the entire economy, is what but it is gonna make us a little uncomfortable. It's gonna cause inflation, and you know, see how people deal with that. But you know, it's worth it. It's gonna be more expensive to not fix it. So yeah, that's it, I guess. Is there anybody want to disagree with me? Fight?